Hello, this is Kanova and I'm coming to you with my April bullet journal setup. The theme for this month is spring, Easter, National Poetry Month, all the things really. I'm just sort of meshing everything together, and today's video is really about process. You'll see what I mean in a moment. We're gonna kick things off and I'm going to show you how I set up this page. If you're new here, I typically draw out everything in advance with pencil and rough sketches, and then I come back in. This video is about process, so the first thing we're going to do is cut, because I am using a different spread than I have used before, sort of a book within a book. I had to cut very carefully in order to make sure that I didn't cut something that would make the journal fall apart. This middle page is not as stable as cutting, say, differently within the journal. And it's my first time using tabs. All right, so we're headed back to my first page, or my subject page or title page, whatever vocabulary you would like to use. We're going to be using a lot of different mediums throughout this process. So I am starting with my Archer and Olive Acrylograph pens. These pens, these particular color pens anyway, came within the subscription box for the month of March, the Journey box. I really loved the color of the Acrylograph pens in the box. I have two full sets of Archer and Olive Acrylograph pens that I purchased fairly recently and haven't really had the opportunity to use them too much. You saw them in the Women's History page. If you haven't saw that video, you should check it out. It's a short, quick video of a spread I did for Women's History Month. But I'm using this sort of marigold color to do the middle of my Easter lilies. Easter lilies is a big part of the theme for April. It is Easter, the month of Easter, but the lilies have very much figured largely in my personal life as of late. I have no idea why, but as I've been going to the market to pick up cut flowers, I'm a huge fan of cut flowers, I have just been gravitating towards lilies in general. Lilies and calla lilies. I've had quite a few bouquets that I've pulled together with this flower included. I actually took, I guess it's like a fun fact about me, I took a floral arranging class my senior year of college. I thought this was going to be sort of a fun class to take to learn to arrange flowers, but I wasn't really paying attention, and it was a 400 level horticulture class, and I had to study my butt off to make it through it. The floral arranging part was really awesome, but the botany, not so much. I was not a science major, though I was a really good student, so adaptation and pivoting to make it happen, very much a part of what I do and my personality. So we're putting these Easter lilies in here in my journal. It's going to figure on this opening page, which is going to be, instead of a quote page, it's going to be a poetry page. This is where we'll honor National Poetry Month. I have a beautiful short poem that I'm going to feature here, and we'll talk about that later. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go through each page and ink all of the items that I have drawn in. So right now we're working on the lilies in this particular point in the spread, but we're going to move through the journal very, very quickly, inking all the different areas first. And we're doing that because some mediums that we're using today, like the paint, the watercolor paint, it will need time to draw and to dry, excuse me. So I want to do that all at once if I can. I want it to sort of be a seamless process, so I'm not waiting on paint to dry while other things are could be being done. The other thing is that I'm using the same colors throughout, and watercolor can dry, and I also just don't want to have to mix too much color. I don't want that much variation in color. We're going to be using the palette, and also a palette where I mix a little bit of color to create all the spreads within the journal. So with so much stuff going on, I wanted to sort of keep things as seamless as possible. It might not be as easy to follow within the context of the video, which is why I'm explaining what's going on, but it makes sense in the process of creating this particular spread for April. All right, erasing, because I changed a few things once I got it inked. And now we are going to move on to the other spreads. I'm still debating about this page, that open page, whether I'll color it or not, but for now it's still white. So I'm going to put a sheet of vellum on that cover page introducing April, and it's going to feature our poem and the month and maybe a few drawings. I'm still on the fence about that, but I bought some vellum. This is some thick vellum. I can't remember the weight of it, but I will put that below so you can buy it if you wish. Actually, I'll provide a link because I picked it up from Amazon. I wanted this paper to be thicker than like a traditional, say, tracing paper, which is also made of like vellum sometimes, and use it to cover the page and to provide just sort of a little layer like you might see in a wedding invitation. I really love like layers and peeling back. I say that often if you follow my videos. So it's going to fit right there. And then we are moving on to what I'm calling my landing pages. These two pages at the back and the front, which are going to be what you see no matter where you're flipping within the spreads for April. The weekly spreads will sort of be anchored by these two spreads at the back and the front. I'm inking the lilies on this ledge of these two pages, and then we will also ink what you're seeing right here, all the other items. So I'm going in with my Acrylograph pens and getting the information, the stamens colored in there with the marigold yellow. This is my mood tracker for the month. We'll talk a little bit more about that as I paint it, but I am inking all of the flowers and things that are going to be black and white that won't be colored by watercolor. It's my calendar page, and now let's paint our cute little bunnies. I've never had a bunny for a pet, but my cousins had a rather enormous bunny with the name Dinky, and I remember him quite fondly. He kicked me a few times, but he was pretty cuddly also. So the bunnies are going to feature in, and I'm going to do some drawing inside these bunnies with my Acrylograph pens. I haven't done like a review of the pens. I'm just using them in a multitude of ways within my videos. I might later on go back and sort of pull the ways that I have used the pens in my personal spreads and do a video on that. Painting in the other bunnies. So I will say this about using watercolor within this particular journal. I have a Maisie Lane Co journal. I love this journal. I love the customization on the front of it. I chose my name, but you could choose other things if you so choose. But the watercolor that I found in most of these journals, watercolor just isn't meant for journals. You're going to have a little bit of warping, so you don't use a lot of water. So I'm using the paint in a different way than I would normally, but I am using layers of watercolor to sort of create different areas, shadowing, etc. I just can't do it the same way that I would with lots of water. Now I'm going in with the green from the primary acrylograph set. I'm using it to do the stamens of my flowers. I'm also using a traditional yellow from that same set. I have a real mix of all the different acrylograph pens that I used within the creating of this particular spread. I'll let you know which sets I used within this process in the section at the bottom. All right. I found that the pens work beautifully. You'll see later on, I sort of forgot to do a stem that connected down, and so I decided to wait and see how the acrylograph pen would work in coverage. All right, so again, using a little bit of water to create this mood tracker. I have been dying to create a mood tracker that is much more of a picture, where it's not just an item that I'm coloring each week, but that it figures into a larger image more naturally. So I decided to do sort of a bunny, even though my bunny isn't a natural color, but a bunny out in its natural habitat, and lay down some colors and have a few wildflowers in the background. All right, it's time for my sort of beginning of my spread pages. This is a breakdown of the month. I'm using my Archer in Olive pen, acrylograph pens, the white and again the marigold yellow, to go in and create all these different shapes. You'll see more of the details as they come together, but they are the lilies again, sort of etched on the bunny's body. I am using the white pen and the marigold pen to create these images. To create a little bit of artistic detail on the bunny. I mean, if I'm going to make them yellow, I might as well go all out in making them interesting to look at. I really wish my camera picked up the details of this much better. All right. So here I am writing down the days of the month. This is where I break down the month onto the side. I put all the days that are important, birthdays, like major appointments. It's just sort of everything at a glance. My calendar here is just so I don't have to go back to the front. I'm sort of keeping everything together. So now I'm going in and I have watercolor at the center of the flowers. My camera gave out a little bit, so you didn't get to see that, but I am going through and blacking out the ledge just so everything pops. I'm using my Tombow black pen, my brush pen, to do this. I considered painting, but I have a lot more control when I use the marker. And I've actually come to like seeing the strokes. It's one of the things about the marker. Unless you do several coats, you really kind of see the strokes. And I've come to sort of like the strokes, almost like you're seeing some sort of brush strokes. On occasion, I do go in to create layers and layers, so I don't have to see that. All right, so I am using my acrylograph pens to draw in the stems. Again, it's a process. What you don't see is that between painting these bunnies and doing this acrylograph work, I let this painting thoroughly dry. One of the things I've found is that these pens work much better when things are thoroughly dry, and not just like dry to the touch, because you can touch watercolor and feel it and no paint comes off, but it's still a little bit wet, the paper. So giving yourself a little bit of a break, if you will, and allowing it to dry will allow the process of using these paint pens from Archer and Olive on top of it, a much better experience. I'm using the pink that came in the Journey box and the Marigold again. And I'm using the white pen and my Jellyroll just to create a little bit of accent. Now we're going back to the front and I'm using my Archer and Olive Acrylograph pens to do the leaves on my beginning page. Alright, stamping. Guys, I have never been good at stamping. These came with the Journey box from the Archer and Olive March subscription box. I'm using a lot of things from this box. I found that it had so much that I really wanted to use and would be great for my spread, and so I did. I think the clear acrylic posts for the stamps work great in terms of lining it up. I still managed to mess it up a bit, but hey, that's how it is. You can kind of see where I didn't quite get it centered, and also where I moved on before the ink had dried, and it dries really quickly, but I had moved on before the ink had dried, and you can see that it made its way onto other sections. I don't mind it too much. I know better for next time. This is my weekly spreads. These are the smallest weekly spread boxes that I have ever done. We're going to see how this goes. I know that April for me is going to be one of those months where I just I have things to do, but they will be sort of concise, and so I don't think that I will need more space than that. But I do have the extra space, and I have space at the back of my journal if I need be. So I made a mistake here. This drives me crazy, but I made a mistake here, and I'm just letting it go and letting it flow. That's the beauty of journaling. It doesn't have to be perfection. You can just sort of lean into it. It's kind of interesting because when I showed my mom the April spread, she's quite into what I'm doing each month in terms of these videos. And when I showed her this spread, she thought it was such an interesting choice to write the date like that. So sometimes mistakes can be interesting things. I went in and started using the ink to edge the gold of my page. I really liked this process. It made things pretty quick, but you have to be really careful. So this was my first time doing the tabs. I am using washi tape to cover the tabs. I have a pretty extensive collection of washi tape. I just can't stop buying it, but I don't use it as much within the context of my spreads, and I'm trying to change that, especially since I can't stop buying it. I just see it and I want it. Not so much need it, but want it. But I thought that this made a nice choice of detail on the spread, and yeah. As you can see, I still need to improve my writing. It's probably the one area of my journal process where I'm just like, Kanova. But I'm working on it, slowly but surely. I did manage to remember that it was April. If you were watching closely, you'll see that I had done a mock-up that said March, and I actually had put March at the top, and I realized what was happening. It was like, stop. Alright, so I glued my vellum down. I actually had to shut the journal and allow it to dry. It will curl up when wet. You really cannot use paint on this vellum. You can, however, use paint pens. The Archer and Olive pens worked quite well on it. So just a note in case you're using the vellum. I found that the microns worked best in terms of the smoothness of working on the vellum. It's a totally different process than working on traditional paper, but it's so pretty. You will see I kind of got wrapped up in drawing and this idea of putting raindrops. You'll see those come next in here, and it totally escaped me that, oh yeah, I'm supposed to put a poem on this page. I kept looking at it like something is missing, and we'll get to that in just a moment. All right, so let's get started writing that poem in there. So I chose a poem by Naira Wahid. She is a Black poet. She's very popular on Instagram. I am actually a fan of poetry, but a lot of the poems that I really love are a little long and aren't the best thing for a page like this. So I chose Naira because her poetry both speaks to me, but it's also very concise and it works for this page. I encourage you to read a poem, maybe one a week or even one a day, because they're not very long during National Poetry Month. Discover something new. So the poem I chose reads, I love myself. The quietest, simplest, most powerful revolution ever. Naira Wahid. There were a few mistakes along the way, but I was overall pretty happy with how this bullet journal spread came together and all of its mini pieces. The marker for me on a spread is, am I anxious to use it? And I'm pretty anxious to finish up March just so I can use my April spread. I love that feeling. All right, see you next month.